A manufacturing overhead budget is the next manufacturing budget that has to be produced. What do we expect to have as overhead, manufacturing overhead costs for the period? This kind of budget just breaks down all of our overhead in variable into fixed categories. And it just comes up with those amounts and just adds them up. So the most important thing here is going to be to understand what is your manufacturing overhead variable cost amounts per unit, or in this case hours. Because once we have those hourly amounts, we can multiply those hourly amounts by the number of hours that we're expecting in each quarter and get budgeted overhead amounts. So I think you remember that we expected hours right here. Direct labor hours are expected to be 6,200 in the first quarter from our labor budget, and we're basing overhead based on labor hours. It says that somewhere in this example. So indirect materials are expected to be $6,200 because they're expected to be $1 per hour. So you just multiply those out for every quarter. Same thing with indirect labor, utilities, maintenance. All right. Fixed costs are just fixed. They're going to be the same every quarter. The only confusing thing here might be to remember to convert these amounts into quarterly amounts, because in this case it's asking for quarterly amounts. So they might tell you that a supervisor makes $80,000 a year. So you need to convert that into 420s for each quarter. It might also say depreciation is, X amount per month. You might have to multiply it by 3 to get a quarterly amount. Okay, then you just add up the costs, and you can get an overhead rate per direct labor hour by dividing total costs by number of expected direct labor hours. The final budget you have to prepare before you can do a budgeted income statement is the selling and admin budget. This is all non-manufacturing costs. It looks the same as an overhead budget, but all the variable and fixed costs are not manufacturing. They're all the period costs. So sales and shipping, advertising, sales salaries, office, depreciation. This is on office equipment, property taxes and insurance on office related stuff. So none of this is manufacturing costs, but it's the same idea. These variable costs are based on unit sales now. $3 per unit, $1 per unit. All right, so it brings forward this what do we think we're going to sell amount from the sales budget, and then we multiply those amounts by the cost per unit for the variable costs, and we just plug in the fixed cost amounts from the data in the problem. Then we can make a budgeted income statement. The most complicated part about this is figuring out cost of goods sold, because cost of goods sold is a combination of materials, labor, and overhead. Cost of goods sold, that's the manufacturing cost of what you sold or what you're expecting to sell. So you have to put a cost to the materials, the labor, and the overhead. So in order to find out that, you have to figure out a total unit cost for each item you produce. Materials, we know that it takes 2 pounds of materials for every unit, and each pound costs $4. So that's $8 per unit in materials. Labor takes 2 hours to make each thing. Each hour of labor costs $10, so it takes 20 hours of labor to make each finished product. And then overhead, we learned in the overhead budget that we knew it took 2 hours to make everything, and we learned that $8 per hour is our overhead cost per unit. So we add up these amounts per unit and we get $44 a unit. Then we can make the budgeted income statement by saying, if we're budgeting to sell 15,000 units, which way back up in the sales budget we said we thought we were gonna sell, then you've got ability to calculate cost of goods sold by multiplying the expected sales units by $44, and that gives you cost of goods sold. All of the sales amount came from the sales budget. The selling and admin came from the selling and admin budget, and cost of goods sold, like I said, came from looking at all of the manufacturing budgets combined.